Hello, I'm Dr. Scott Watier.
And I'm Tommy Welling, and you're listening to the Fasting for Life podcast.
This podcast is about using fasting as a tool to regain your health, achieve ultimate wellness, and live the life you truly deserve.
Each episode is a short conversation on a single topic with immediate actionable steps. We cover everything from fat loss and health and wellness to the science of lifestyle design.
We started Fasting for Life because of how fasting has transformed our lives, and we hope to share the tools that we have learned along the way. Hey everyone, welcome to the Fasting for Life podcast. My name is Dr. Scott Watier, and I'm here, as always, with my good friend and colleague, Tommy Welling. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Hey, Scott, how are you?
Doing great, my friend. Happy February.
Absolutely.
We're in month 2 of 2025. Man, that first month went fast.
Right.
See what I did there?
Yeah,
All
I did.
right. Off to a great start with a dad joke, with a pun absolutely intended.
Yeah.
Fast start to 2025, man. Challenge that we're in right now, just incredible. So today's going to be an interesting conversation, and we just had this conversation yesterday. We do this every day 6 of our 7-day Master Your Fasting challenges. We talk about exercise. We talk about the protective nature of fasting on lean muscle tissue. We talk about drivers of insulin resistance and metabolic dysfunction that aren't food. And the article that we're going to look at today is out of the Journal of Nutrients, and it came out at the end of 2024, and it's a systematic review. And it's the synergistic effects of time-restricted feeding and resistance training on body composition and metabolic health. Systematic review and meta-analysis. So like one of the gold standard type articles or reviews that we want, right? It came out end of 2024, so it's recent, it's new, it's a shiny new study where we can talk about, which is one of the questions that we get often. Fasting, how long should I fast? Like, what does my maintenance plan look like? What should I eat? Should I be eating a certain way, et cetera, et cetera? And reality is, as we get closer to your goal weight or your goal with fasting, body composition and metabolic health are at the core crux of what we want to achieve or obtain for long-term results. So we're going to get into all that in just a second. That was a really long-winded open, but I want to welcome in all the new listeners. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. Head back to episode 1, give it a listen, learn more about Tommy's journey and his transformation, my journey and transformation with fasting, why we've now done 260-something, 7 episodes over the last 4 or 5 years, 4 million downloads, 35 live events and challenges and resources and coaching, and why we have such a passion for fasting as a tool and a vehicle to once and for all get off the weight loss roller coaster and transform your health. And that ultimately, what I was just talking about with the conversation for today's article is we want that long-term, that long-lasting change. So if you're a long-term listener, happy to be on this journey with you.
Yeah.
Thanks for making it and making us part of your routine. Thanks for trusting us in this process. And we would love if you felt inclined, if you've had a cool testimonial or experience with following what it is that we do, shoot us an email, info@thefastingforlife.com. We'll share it live on one of the episodes. If you want to drop a 5-star review, we are appreciative of that as well. All right, Tommy, where do you want to start with this article?
In the review, maybe, That's
What'd you say?
way
Oh, yeah.
I said drop the testimonial in the review. Yeah.
Little combo.
Yeah, that's always fun.
A little combo sandwich, a little review plus share your journey, share your results. We love getting those messages. So keep them coming.
Yeah, so, when we talk about this, coming from the eat less, move more, and the gym and diet culture and all of that kind of stuff, that's where, we both found ourselves wanting to burn more fat, but also we had been on the strength and muscle gaining, kind of side of things when we came into fasting too. So we both had this concern, which was like, okay, I want to burn fat, but at the same time, I don't want to give up my muscle mass, or I want to give up as little muscle mass and strength as possible. So what about that? And that's always kind of the big question mark, especially if that resonates. If you've spent any time in the gym working on any strength or muscular goals, and then you want to burn some fat, and then but maybe you haven't tried out fasting, or you haven't gain confidence in the muscle preservation process too, and kind of marrying, those two things, because fat burning and muscle building are two separate and distinct physiological processes, both very, very important, and both correlated highly with our overall health, our lifespan, health span, and longevity. So very, very important. So I love any large meta-analysis that really digs into this, because no matter how long you fasted for, this is always something that's helpful to understand, know what we can do to kind of optimize the process, and gain confidence when we're in a fat loss phase, because it's really important to preserve and be building muscle strength and muscle efficiency all throughout our lifespan. And it only gets more important as we get older, because our muscular cells are our powerhouse. They determine our metabolic rate, and they determine our metabolic flexibility, efficiency, and ultimately how our body's functioning.
And health overall, right?
Yes,
Metabolic
yes,
health, for sure.
exactly.
So this is not a trick question. I'm going to see is, if we were to ask just anyone out there, what's the two main levers that you need to pull to lose weight? What do they say?
Eat less, move more.
Yeah, right? Eat less, move more. Gonna biggest loser my way. The show, not an individual. The show, biggest loser my way to health and weight loss. And we know
I
that.
still have a food scale that has the Biggest Loser logo on it from when they were licensed or co-branded or whatever, from probably 20 years ago.
I hold you in high regard, my friend, but you just went down a notch. So I'm sorry. I can't believe that.
Well, there's no reason to replace it, but at the same time, that's the era that it's from. I still use it every once in a while.
Yep. Eat less, move more, right? So separate and distinct physiological processes, obviously related mainly in their behavior, the way you value them or how you want to use them. So frustrating part is if you not the frustrating part, what the research clearly shows is that if you lose a considerable amount of weight and you don't build muscle, you now have a vacuum of space where your old habits are going to creep back in, your hormone, your hunger, your cravings, your lifestyle is going to creep back in, and now you have this vacuum where you're going to be in a worse metabolic function from a body composition standpoint.
Wow.
You're going to have less muscle, right, on your body, and you are then going to regain the weight. And then you're going to be in a more complex, worse metabolic state. And then you're going to work harder to lose the weight again. And then if we don't prioritize both at the same time.
So you have a physical vacuum and a habit vacuum as well.
Yes. So one of the things that people like to poke holes in, and we just talked about this in the last episode about the clickbaity headline or snippet from an article about Peter Attia saying, fasting, it's probably not bad, shouldn't do it. It was based off of his own personal anecdote of him losing about 10 pounds of muscle over the course of 3 years because he was doing multiple 10-day fasts 3 to 4 times a year, plus a 72-hour fast every month as a leaner individual. Right? Not what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
So we're talking about, eat less, move more, and folks that have multiple loss gain cycles, that have not healthy functioning metabolic mitochondria. Not that your metabolism's broken, but that you just haven't been able to get those long lasting results. And that's the reality of the statistics. We just went through New Year's resolutions time. Well, resolutions don't work, for a whole host of multitude of reasons, but we would rather set a goal of let's say 30 pounds of weight loss so we can attain the metabolic function and health that comes with it. Right? So we want to make sure that we are directionally accurate. And one of the things that people like to poke holes in, like I was alluding to, is, fasting, you're starving your body, you're not getting enough protein, you're going to lose your lean muscle tissue. And that's not what we find because of the growth hormone, the lean muscle tissue protective nature of fast cycling. Now, we're not talking about extended fast. We're talking about what we recommend and coach people to do is 18 up to 48 hours mostly, and then occasionally throwing in a 72-hour fast if you're in a significant fat loss phase. Prioritizing protein, sleep, stress resiliency, as well as the second half of the equation, which is this move more, but not just move in the sense of cardio, getting your steps in, burning calories, but working on resistance training to build the powerhouse of the body. Because ultimately we want, and this is what we coach, when people lose the weight and they're within maybe at the halfway point if they're losing 100 pounds. And we've got multiple folks that we've helped do that. Or if you've got people reversing diabetes, right? They need to change their body composition ultimately for long-lasting results. The identity shift that comes with that is what allows it to last and stay and to be the new you, right? So to speak, as we say this time of year, right?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of, when you get closer to that end goal, then the devil's in the details. So we want you to have plateaus where the scale stops moving, but you go down a pant size.
Yeah.
Right? We want that body composition change. So you're more efficient, more lean muscle, less fat, right? And we're trending directionally accurate in that direction. So then we can sustain those results because we have now altered our, what's beneath the surface, so to speak, if that makes sense.
Man, it really does. And I love that you just mentioned body composition, because from a mindset standpoint, if you're not on the lookout for those kind of changes that come about within body composition, because you don't see those on the scale, and if you're not, maybe trying on some of those more aspirational clothes that you have that are the the size down, you might not notice it too. In like the baggier clothes, you might not notice it, but at the same time, that's a huge win, because if you see 0 pounds changed, or maybe even the scale ticked up a little bit, you've felt like you're doing most of the things right, making some good food choices, prioritizing protein, hitting a lot of consistent fasts, and they don't have to be ultra long fasts either, but you're showing up, and then all of a sudden, you're seeing some change that is indicative of body composition. That's huge. And when we continue to trend in that direction, it's so much more important than the fickle, short-term scale change. But the scale change is ultimately like what a lot of us will look for first thing, on a given day. We step onto the scale to check with ourselves, check our progress, right? And then you kind of get a passing or a failing grade, maybe, if that's how you choose to interpret it. So what happens off the scale, if you're on the lookout for it, is so much more important too. And a lot of those temporary plateaus look like that for a good reason.
And that's the thing. Wow, man, if I'm fasting, I'm going to lose my strength. I'm going to lose my gains, right?
Yeah. What about my gains? Yeah.
Well, yeah, if you're not fat adapted and you're not used to working out fasted, then yeah, trying to go PR your deadlift is probably not an ideal scenario. If you're doing long distance cardio type workouts, then yeah, it's probably not an ideal scenario, right? So there's really some cool things here, just big picture on what this study looked at. And I love where they came from is they're just in their introduction. They say the global scale focus on health and physical fitness has intensified with our increasing understanding of their crucial roles in preventing disease, enhancing quality of life, and increasing longevity. Dietary strategies and exercise regimens are central to these goals, right? What are the two levers you're going to pull? You said it. Eat less, move more. Change my diet, work out more, right?
Sure.
But the key to optimizing health outcomes lies not in adopting these strategies individually, but rather in recognizing their synergistic potential when judiciously combined. I'm like, ooh, all right, this is cool.
Yeah.
I like the framework of this study. So TRF, time-restricted feeding, intermittent fasting, they're the same, one and the same, right? And the window that they used, so I love that they looked at a whole bunch of different studies. The average study length was about 8 weeks. They looked at a bunch of really rigorous criteria. They actually say here, I just have my notes at the end in terms of the studies that I can't find the note in terms of the quality of the studies.
Yeah, I know they had at least one study, if not a couple of them, that went all the way to the 12-month mark. But I thought that was cool. Taking an average of about 8 weeks is a pretty good period of time to see some changes to muscular composition and or strength and or fat loss as well. So that was it's a good time range, but it even expanded farther off than that. And these were mostly normal weight individuals, like healthy individuals as well. So the cool thing is here, compartmentalizing I believe it was about 12 p.m. to 8 p.m., like an 8-hour window, so 16-hour fast. So we were at like a 16-hour fast with approximately an 8-hour nutrition opportunity window without any deliberate caloric restriction, right?
Yeah, so that was one of the key, the fun takeaways, right? So they had the control group plus resistance training, and the TRF group plus resistance training, and when they looked at the differences, that ended up, the TRF group ended up having my computer just like stopped working in real time. So you guys get a peek behind the curtain. We're going to leave this in. Like, we're not going to take this out. You guys get to hear all of the, how the sausage is made.
175
174.88.
Right?
I was trying to be specific. 175 caloric difference in terms of the outcome. So in terms of energy intake.
Okay, so the time restricted feeding group naturally had a slight caloric deficit without deliberately putting that into the method.
Yep, absolutely. Okay. So let's go big picture on in terms of what the outcome were. So we looked at the different studies. We love that it was time restricted feeding. They looked at the bias risk. They initially looked for they had initially 309 studies. They got it all the way down to the 7 studies across 164 total participants. The BMI ranged from 22 to 30. So you're in the overweight, non-obese category, 22 to 45 years of age. And here's what the body composition did. In the TRF plus RT group, showed a significant decrease in body mass. We'll talk about the split here in just a minute. There was no significant differences in the fat-free mass between the two groups.
Nice.
Here's a cool thing. No significant difference in muscle cross-sectional areas or strength between the groups.
All right. That's what you want to see.
Exactly. So there was not a significant effect on muscle mass or strength, which was really cool. Both groups, I find this interesting about the whole anabolic window, did take 20 grams of protein post-workout.
Okay. Not that that's required, but they did build that into the method. So just to kind of standardize. So not a bad thing there. As long as we're pacing out protein consistently when we're breaking our fast,
as we like to say, right?
Yeah, prioritizing protein. It doesn't happen by accident, but as long as we have a steady flow of protein when we are eating, that should be sufficient here for the same results that they saw. But the cool thing here was that also they had a substantially higher decrease in fat mass of 3.3 pounds in the time restricted feeding group, which then
kilograms or pounds?
3.3 pounds, 1.5 kilograms, for fat mass.
That was fat mass, not total mass, total loss.
Yes.
Yeah,
exactly. And so if you take that 175 calorie deficit that was built into the time restricted component, so again, they weren't purposefully doing that, but it was kind of built into their food compartmentalization. It just happened to fall that way. So that caloric deficit would account for about 85% of that 3.3 pound loss. And so that means you actually have a little bit better improvement in metabolic efficiency, metabolic flexibility that happened within the time-restricted feeding group over the control group. And I'm going to hypothesize that that's because they would have spent more time with depleted glycogen levels, so less water weight, less water and carbohydrates stored within the liver and the skeletal muscle. That means that they can actually spend a little bit more time in the fat burning range of things. And again, these are fairly lean or kind of normal weight, quote unquote, individuals. Normal to slightly overweight individuals, but they don't have a ton of fat to lose. But they can still benefit from spending more time towards the that balance point where we're tipping the scales into fat burning rather than fat storage. If we kind of think about those as kind of like a balance point, they're spending more time over there on the fat burning side. And then the other group that has no time restricted component, will likely spend time with, less ketones accumulating, and then more liver and skeletal muscle glycogen repleted. So a little bit more water weight on their skeleton, on their frame, which then leads to that difference in the body weight between the two groups as well, because you had about 6.4 pounds of difference in body weight, and again 3.3 pounds of that being actual fat mass difference.
And we're not talking about crazy biggest loser type workouts. So these were resistance training 3 to 4 times a week, major muscle groups, bench press, squats, dumbbells, etc.
Yeah,
sessions 60 to 90 minutes, moderate to high intensities, 2 to 4 sets, 8 to 12 reps. I mean, this is like standard op getting in the gym stuff.
Sure. Keep it simple. Yeah.
It's keep it simple, not complex, right? And the cool thing is that TRF is a practical tool, right? It creates a caloric deficit without having to do all of the tracking and calorie counting and calorie restriction. Mm-hmm. If you just want to simplify it from this perspective. The weight loss effects are not inherently superior, but the cool thing is that these folks that were in these healthy weight ranges, there was only one study that had 21 folks that were overweight and obese. Mm-hmm. So the rest of the folks probably didn't really think they had much weight to lose.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? They're like, yeah, I'm doing pretty good.
Sure. Yeah. I'm at a good weight.
Again, go ahead.
I'm at a good weight. Yeah.
Yeah. But the cool thing was that we saw the other markers that they looked at improve. The metabolic markers, the long-term health and longevity markers. So,
and they had no apparent health conditions too within those groups. And so again, they weren't looking for improvements. They weren't out of range, but they still saw benefits, saw more optimal, blood markers, even when they were in a healthy range before, which is great.
So total cholesterol went down by 10 points. LDL cholesterol went down by 10 points. Insulin levels significantly reduced.
Excellent.
HDL didn't really show a significant difference, but that one typically doesn't in the short term. Mm-hmm. No significant differences in testosterone and adiponectin levels. Right? So muscle growth, we want that testosterone for both men and women. Mm-hmm. So reductions in body weight, reductions in labs, reduction in cardiometabolic markers, reduction in fat mass, reduction in insulin levels.
Yeah.
So just a really cool study.
You could essentially rename this study. Is time-restricted feeding or time-restricted eating safe for normal weight individuals? Or, what are the effects of, cardiometabolic markers and resistance training for normal weight individuals, without other health conditions, time restricted feeding and resistance training. And so there's multiple interpretations here that can be extrapolated based on, this actual sample group, which are really encouraging.
I found it interesting too, from a nutritional standpoint. So you get the question, like, how should I eat? Should I do low carb? Should I do keto? Should I'm a vegan? Should I do carnivore? Whatever. Mm-hmm. Protein. That's it. I don't really care how you split.
Sure.
How you split it.
Simplify.
They did emphasize in all groups 1.4 grams a kilogram per body weight per day. So we call that prioritizing protein, right? Yeah. And they were also advised to consume their energy based on their REE plus 250. So they had actually encouraged them to eat more.
Okay.
Right? But inherently, the beauty of TRF is that your hunger cues improve, your satiation improves when you prioritize protein.
Yeah.
Your metabolic powerhouses of the cell turn on, so they become more efficient. You've got less blood sugar floating around in your body. You've got more energy.
Well, you need some time to be taking in excess calories too. Like that takes some time. So
it's counterintuitive when we're talking about fasting, right?
Yeah, but if you strictly compartmentalize the time that your nutrition opportunity window is open, then there's less opportunity. There's some built-in mental or cognitive restraint that's very, very helpful in the process, where you go, well, okay, if I'm hungry, I'll eat at 12 when my nutrition opportunity window opens up, rather than just listening to just any slight hunger cue from when you first wake up. Like you might not be hungry when you very first wake up, but maybe an hour or so after that, maybe you can kind of start to feel the hunger. Well, the beauty about time restricted eating is that that small amount of hunger doesn't necessarily lead to taking action on that hunger and then bringing in a load of calories, a higher blood sugar, and an insulin response that you may not have been ready for, or maybe you're not wanting it, just yet. And maybe it'd be better if you combine that with your lunch. That might be better, because then you're avoiding multiple blood sugar spikes and multiple insulin spikes throughout the day. And then just, overall probably going to feel better too, because it's not like you're just going to combine meals and just start eating double or triple meals. It doesn't usually work out like that. You're going to get better satiety cues. It's like you said, it's a bit counterintuitive, especially when you first start time restricted feeding.
And you mentioned the glycogen stores earlier. So a couple of other interesting things out of one of the tables about the energy breakdown is that the time restricted feeding plus resistance training group versus the control group, that group had a significant decrease in carb intake and a much more significant increase in protein and fat intake.
Nice.
So time restricted feeding plus resistance training, reduction in total energy, particularly in carbs, and increased protein. I'm like, man, perfect. Right?
Yeah.
But they weren't told to do that.
Yeah, they weren't told to do that. Yeah, it just kind of happened naturally.
Yep, it was really cool. And then when we look at the muscle cross sectional, area, they looked at the upper limb and the lower limb, and we won't go through each individual one. But what they looked at was combining the TRF with the resistance training did not lead to significant improvements of muscle size or strength, but when we look at the fat mass and the weight loss, it absolutely, and the metabolic marker movement, it absolutely had an effect on body composition and metabolic health.
For sure. And
which is so cool.
Yeah, because we always want to go to those cross-sectional areas and dive in, because sometimes these kind of studies will say, oh, there was no statistical difference, between the groups. But sometimes the statistical power is not high enough to actually show that. And so we do want to look to see if there's any trends, or we want to look under those rocks for any small clues. And it was interesting, because you don't see any trends that would lead you to go, okay, yeah, maybe they weren't statistically significant, but maybe it's not optimal. So you don't see those either. You see very little differences, and if they're on one side of the aisle over here, like in the upper body, they're over on the other side of the aisle for the lower body. So they really do appear to be kind of just a random distribution, non-trending. So which is really cool and further encouraging of the overall results that we saw within the study. And when you take a look at the fat mass difference there, like I pointed out earlier, about 85% of those results can be calculated from just that caloric deficit in and of itself. But then an additional 15% of those results, to make the full difference in body fat mass between the groups, is not accounted for within that caloric deficit that was built into the group. So that means you have some other factors potentially at play here, which could be a little bit greater metabolic efficiency, flexibility. Just the fact that you have that, what you might attribute it to, might be the macronutrient distribution that you just talked about on their plate. Because as you decrease the number of carbohydrates, and I'm not saying that everyone needs to just restrict carbohydrates.
Right.
It's not the holy grail. But at the same time, if you take a certain plate and then you...
Let me add a caveat. We're not talking ultra refined, ultra processed, convenient, gas station, fast food, restaurant food, that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about
absolutely.
real whole food sources of carbohydrates.
Sure. Yeah. More natural foods for sure. If you take some of those
we
carbohydrates...
don't need those messages in our DMs.
if you took 100 calories worth of the carbohydrates that are on a plate, and then you replace those with 100 calories of protein, a good protein source, and maybe that's 10% of the plate, let's say, just fuel wise, you're going to get a better metabolic effect. You're going to get a better change within what happens to the body to actually digest through those calories. And if you take those and you start extrapolating that over weeks and then into a couple of months, that could be enough to equate to account for that 15% difference in that body fat mass, where you start raising the temperature of the body because of the higher thermic effect of food. Yep. When you're talking about protein versus carbohydrates, and you start to burn more even when you're eating the same number of calories, let alone a slight calorie deficit.
I mean, the difference between the two groups was 2 tablespoons of peanut butter in terms of the caloric intake. We're not talking about a lot here in terms of the beneficial effect, right? We often want to pull the movement lever, the workout lever, to burn more calories to lose weight, but it's only like 5 to 7%, maybe 10% of our total caloric burn on a day-to-day basis. Especially, I mean, the more muscle you have, the better it's going to get. Yeah. So one thing I wanted to mention here was that the 31% of the study was women as well, without apparent health conditions. We get this question often. Should women fast differently than men? We talked about at the end of last episode, specifically if you're going to do extended fasting, when you should do that during your cycle. But when we're talking about muscle building, no, right? Like, the results speak for themselves. I now know more frequently, this article came out at the end of 2024. There's a lot more studies that have women in the study for fasting studies. The studies 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, all those studies were done in men, right? Yeah. So I just want to highlight this here. If you're listening, like, how do I simplify this equation? Well, you're going to do resistance training 3 to 4 days a week. You're going to keep it as simple as possible. Find a program you can follow. You're going to stick to your consistent fasting windows. You're going to prioritize protein. You're going to stay hydrated and focus on sleep.
Boom.
Don't worry about all the other stuff. Quiet the noise, right? Yeah. That might be people. That might be food. That might be, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Might be boot camp classes.
Child, boot camp classes, right? The gym marketing, right? The Fitspo marketing, but whatever it is. So, Tommy, I'm really excited about this study. I'm really excited about the challenge that we're going through right now. Just the results have been absolutely incredible. If you guys are looking for more support, head to the show notes. You can sign up for the next challenge. You can email us, info@thefastingforlife.com. You can download one of our resources. But ultimately, pick 1 or 2 things from today's episode and put into action, right?
Yeah, I think the biggest one might be adding back in some resistance exercise if you've been kind of avoiding it or waiting for your next weight goal. Because, I did that in the past where I was waiting for a certain weight goal in order to add back in the resistance training that I was used to doing. And I don't know exactly, where that came from or where it might come from for any listeners who resonate with that. But add some back in, because the more consistently you're focused on muscular and strength gains, the quicker you're likely to see your next fat loss goal achieved. And also you're working on the things that are going to lead towards more like better metabolic and long-term and longevity and long-term health, which is just a win-win. So don't put off one set of goals until you hit another. That's like the I'll be happy when trap. And we want to avoid that as much as possible. So check out the blueprint to fasting for fat loss, and let's put in some consistent fasting today and add it in with some simple, consistent, repeatable resistance training so you can be making consistent progress moving forward here.
100%. 100%. All right, my friend. Great conversation. Cool article.
Yeah.
Month 2 of 2025.
Let's do it.
Happy fasting, everyone. We'll talk soon.
Cool. Thank you. Bye.
See ya. Bye.
So, you've heard today's episode, and you may be wondering, where do I start? Head on over to thefastingforlife.com and sign up for our newsletter, where you'll receive fasting tips and strategies to maximize results and fit fasting into your day-to-day life.
While you're there, download your free Fast Start guide to get started today. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review, and we'll be back next week with another episode of Fasting for Life.